All right. Hello. How's it going? We are live here on Facebook and we are doing the Men's Monday Mastermind. And today, what we're going to be talking about is what is regenerative farming. So, one of the things that we were talking about before we started this call is that a lot of people don't really know what regenerative farming is, or even like sometimes the difference between organic and the difference between soil quality and the difference between like nutrient dense soil and soil that's like nutrient depleted, and like how does that interact and interfere with how do the nutrients get to the plants. And some people don't realize that the soil itself is like the food and the food source and the nutrient source of the plants, and whatever they get from there is going to make them nutrient dense or not nutrient dense. And so stuff like that. So we figured we would come on here and share a little bit, of our experiences with you, and talk a little bit about, what is the difference between maybe regenerative soil and maybe conventional soil, and maybe conventional farming, right? So I'll just share a little bit of some of my experiences, and then we can jump into Mike and some of your experiences in this. So for me personally, I've done some organic farming in San Diego. I live in San Diego right now. So it's been a few years, but a few years ago, I did some organic farming for about 8 months or so. And what we did is it was organic farming, as well as the focus was regenerative farming. And the focus was also edible landscaping. So it's kind of a unique kind of operation. So it's like a blend of a few different things. Because most people, like San Diego, is kind of like, okay, I want to make it pretty, make it look nice. And so the idea was to blend that together, but with real food. So like, yes, it looks nice, but also you can eat from it. What we did is we would plant, would build boxes for them, build gardens for them, set it up in their yard. And it was a little bit of mix with urban kind of farming, because some of the homes, were unique and like in like urban landscaping and needed to, find ways to build a box and get soil in there. But some had like a lot of space, where it's like, you could do a lot with this yard that you have right here. And so that was a really, really good experience, and learned a lot, from someone that's been doing that for like over 8 years. And so it was great to learn from him and his experience. And it's really helpful to see it and like touch it and put your hands in the soil and feel it and see the plants grow and see the way, that you didn't need chemicals. Like, just seeing that firsthand, like you don't need these chemicals like everyone tells you, And so that was really powerful to see, because sometimes people don't realize that either, right? They're just like, I think, we need it. Like, what are you going to do if you don't have the chemicals? There's going to be flies everywhere. You're going to have to shoot the squirrels. You're going to have to shoot the wolves. You're going to have to, and it's just like, have you done this before? Like, have you? And so they haven't. And so when you've done it a little bit, like you can see, like, even just like, there's ways to deter pests. Like, you don't need to have a chemical. There's like deterrents, distractions, even like putting like fake snakes and fake, birds and fake things to like make them realize, hey, I'm going to stay away from there. Like no one was harmed. No animals were harmed, in that process. And they don't realize that's a thing, that you could do. And then on top of that, the food that we share, right? I've been inside, where they grow I've learned how they grow the food from the people that grow the food. And one of the things that they do is what we're talking about is regenerative farming as well. And so I learned how they are able to recreate the soil and build the soil from scratch, which is something really unique that a lot of places don't do, because they're like, well, that takes a lot of time, right? But it actually saves you time in the long run. If you build the soil right the first time, it takes a little bit of extra time, right? But if you build the soil right the first time, it can regenerate itself multiple times over and over and over and over for many years. It actually saves you time. And that's why they did it for thousands of years. It's only been within the last 100 years or so that we totally said, we're going to change it all up. But essentially, those are some of the things that just a brief. I mean, I've been inside the Amazon. I mean, not the rainforest of Belize. We grew food there. We grew food inside the rainforest with nutrient dense soil from the actual leaves of the. I mean, from the rainforest itself. It replenished itself on its own. So I've seen food grow there, as well as parts of there that are like really the more swampy, where you have to do it a little bit different. It's closer to the ocean, right? And the soil isn't so deep, and there's ways to grow there too. So that was I thought, I was like, oh, I know how to grow, but it was a totally different method. You had to grow very different because there was a certain amount of soil that was like maybe this thick, not so deep. Then right underneath there was like this it would look like almost like concrete, but it was like, I forgot what it was called, but it was like a really thick layer. And you had to get through that you had to dig deep beyond that in order to get, is maybe like another, maybe 2 feet that you had to get through that to like another level of soil. And if you didn't do that, some of the plants wouldn't grow, like the palm trees or the coconut palms. There's a lot that could grow with that small amount of soil on the top. But then there was a whole other set of plants that you needed to get through for the roots to get through for the taproot to get through down so that it would get enough water source, because that was blocking the water source. And some of the roots could grow sideways all the way out. So like learning that, like there's all these different like things. And so like even people that grow in California, or they grow in Texas, or they grow in Florida, or they grow in Canada, it's different. The way the dirt is very different, and the way the soil is very different, and what you do to it is different. I learned that's just a little bit of experience that I learned. But I know people that never even stepped foot in a garden or a farm or anything like that, And even before that, like I was looking at factory farms, like because I would like go onto them, like inside of them, like dairy farms and pig farms and slaughterhouses, and like like even people don't do that. Like you don't even know people don't even know what that's like. So I have like a huge, like not a pretty decent perspective on like on some of these farms and what they look like on the inside, and even what's ethical and what's not ethical. And someone's like arguing plant farming versus animal farming. Like, have you been inside those farms? Like the terror and the fear that you feel inside is very different from a strawberry farm to a pig slaughterhouse. Like it's very different. So anyways, yeah, Mike, what would you like to say to this?
Well, that reminds me of a saying that I remember hearing years ago, where it's about discussing with people the ethics of what food they're eating, and it goes, if you believe that a slaughterhouse is that ethical, then why do we bring children on school trips apple picking and not to slaughterhouses? And how would you feel, like if we suggested, like, let's take the kids to a slaughterhouse for their trip because it's ethical and it's fine, right? Because so when you contrast them like side by side, it's quite stark, the differences. But as to the farming, I think you've hit on an important point in the sense that a lot of people don't really know where their food's coming from and how it's being farmed, right? And I think like conventional farming, there's all these sort of thoughts and concerns that people have, like you said, prey and predators and what's out in the field and having to kill them and all this stuff. But a lot of the problems that, the bugs and all that kind of stuff, a lot of these problems are coming from the fact that conventional farming has gone over to monocropping, right? Which is where you take a huge plot of land, you flatten it out, you grow one type of thing, they're all in like a perfect uniform line. Like obviously this is beneficial for the economy of growing, right? It's beneficial for making money, but that's not how nature works. Nothing in nature grows in perfect straight lines. Nothing in nature has like these wide open clearings. So you start to introduce these other problems like erosion, for example. You're talking about like growing in the rainforest. I mean, as soon as you start to remove the ground under those trees in the rainforest, then soil starts to erode, they start to die. They no longer have this cycle of dropping down all these nutrients via leaves and stuff, right? And breaking it down. So regenerative farming is there's a lot of different, like neither of us is an expert, but just from what I've read and researched and what I've practiced, a little bit on my own, it involves stuff like choosing which crops you're growing and letting them, break down, not tilling the soil, letting the roots break back down into the soil, letting the roots grow into the soil. So like alfalfa growing, right? That investment you're talking about, spending 13 years growing alfalfa on a plot of land so that you get these roots that grow like, 100 plus, 150 plus feet deep into the ground, right? And really spread out, cavities in the soil for air and water to flow through, and animals, worms to get through, and all this kind of stuff. It's a
And
really
that
big.
also replaces the nitrogen in the soil, which is usually what's missing from the conventional farming, is the replacement of the nitrogen. That's why a lot of the fertilizers are replacing the nitrogen, because it isn't being regenerated.
Yeah, nitrogen and potassium, and there's various items that people think, calcium, magnesium, whatever. There's all these different like plant supplements, right? But essentially that's because we've stripped away the layers that nature built into growth that allow for these replenishments, right? And so, talking about, let's say, like bugs and pests and stuff like that, well, there's something called companion plants or companion planting, where you, as you said, the deterrents, right? You can place various plants like marigolds, for example, help deter certain pests. They're also a lovely looking flower, and it just so turns out when you plant them with specific other companion plants, they complement each other with their roots in the ground, with the nutrients they're using, what's still available. One of the issues with conventional farming is, like I said, growing all that one crop, monocropping, and then often doing it, 2 years in a row, let's say, and knowing, okay, if we do it 2 years in a row, it will grow, but we will deplete the soil. We're gonna, kill that soil off now, as opposed to what you're saying, which is an investment of, first off, building the soil so that it's able to regenerate itself. But then, as we're discussing here, like with regenerative farming, switching through crops and doing companion planting and knowing, okay, well, if I grow, as a simple example, if I grow corn, let's say, which is a really common farmed food, on this space of land, this area in front of me that's however large, next year I need to switch it to another crop, because corn is going to absorb, and then you look at your list of nutrients, right? And so we need to switch over to something that will complement or replenish that, or allow the replenishment of that, because it only absorbs these other things. And then, as I said, allow the leaves to break back down, allow stuff to fall into the garden. Composting is a big factor of regenerative farming, right? Reintroducing nature has a cycle that it's built, right? So, plants that grow, let's say you're growing tomato plants and you have tomatoes. For myself, on my own property, at least, when I grow tomatoes and I cut them up and there's the parts that I don't eat, I put that back in my compost and break it back down, because I look at it as an energy cycle. These nutrients, or this material was constructed out of the soil. That means these nutrients, or some form more complex of those nutrients, needs to be reintroduced.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where, like, when you go back to like monocropping as an example, not only are you not doing the right things for the soil, like what we talked about, like setting it up for regenerating, but when it's time to harvest, they often take the whole plant away. And like you said, like it's a whole new field. And the problem with that is there's many problems with that, but a couple of the problems with that is, one, the sun now is coming down onto that soil and basically it has no protection. So it's being kind of cooked essentially, and being depleted, of its life force, because it's not being shaded properly like it should be. So that often dries it out and kills the soil. And then the other thing is, what's replenishing the soil to get it back Another huge of the nitrogen source and a lot of the nutrients that the soil needs to be replenished are coming from all those leaves, all of the leaves, and even if you look at like even in the city or wherever you're at and you see leaves fall, they rake all the leaves away, but what's actually better for you is keep all those leaves underneath the tree, keep it all together, get it all back where it's supposed to. Why do you think the leaf falls and drops where it drops? Like underneath the tree, it's for the root system, it's for the soil, it's to replenish the soil, it's supposed to be there, right? Or it could be used by other animals or whatever, but it's supposed to be there. And it has its own cycle. Like you said, nature has its way of doing what it's doing. That's why you look at the rainforest in parts where no man has ever been. You don't need to haul in a bunch of animal manure to make sure that the rainforest is growing. You don't need to do anything. It's like the best soil in the world already. And that is the natural cycle. All the leaves are falling where they're supposed to fall, and the nutrients are being replenished, and the seeds and the animals are eating, and they're having some droppings, here and there. But it's really the majority is the trees can replenish themselves. That's why we say it's so powerful. Like you could sequester almost all of the carbon in the world, just by planting enough trees, and you just be like, everything would be fine. That's a whole nother benefit that they also have. Like they're just incredible what they do. And that's why you see the rainforest can create so much abundance of soil and life. And it's the most nutrient dense part of the world, but also the most dense part of life, and also the most amount of water. And it's called a rainforest. It even creates its own water. The trees create water too, which is like, I didn't even believe that was possible till I saw it. I was like, I hear about it, but when you like see like how it happens and how much rain is created, it's like, I know why it's called a rainforest. Like it's pretty interesting. And so how does this compare to, like, okay, you getting foods like this, right? That's why we're sharing these foods all the time, because it's so different and it makes such a difference. How do foods like this make a difference, when it comes to like conventional food? Like if you grow food, regenerative soil, like what we're talking about, clean soil, how it's supposed to be grown, how does that make a difference in terms of health or nutrients and stuff like that?
Well, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's one of the things I think that is not discussed enough. It's becoming more well known, but I think a lot of people are not aware of this. And I think because of that, organic food and regenerative farmed food is sort of scoffed at, right? Or people think like, oh, it's nonsense, or it's a gimmick. They're trying to make money on you. Um, Ultimately, though, when you start spraying pesticides, when you start monocropping, when you start doing these things, it's depleting and damaging the soil, as we've discussed, right? And you're not replenishing or re-adding, the elements that it needs. And so the plant, people don't think about this, but the plant that you eat that allegedly has, vitamin C or vitamin A or vitamin K or whatever nutrients that it has, it's developing that, or, pulling that up out of the soil, right? And out of the elements in the soil. And, so when you look at the quality of soil in regenerative farming versus traditional farming, there's a huge difference. And, I don't want to misquote, because I don't off the top of my head know like the data sets well enough, but I know, there's been studies done on crops that are grown in conventional farming practices, and they have a reduction of, let's say up to 30-40% of their vitamins, right? And that's assuming that those are, being grown to the best standard and qualities for that conventional farming. There's a lot of food that probably wouldn't meet that standard. But I've read and heard of studies where there's so much of a difference that one conventional carrot would one regeneratively farmed carrot would be equivalent to about 300-400 conventionally farmed carrots. Sorry, give me 1 second here. I got chaos going on in the background.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I'll pick up. Yeah, so that is something that is of relevance for sure as far as when you're eating these foods. And something that came to mind when you were saying that is when you look at the nutrition label and you look at the label and let's say it says, X amount of vitamin C, based on the nutrients that are in there or the food that is in there, right? And that's a baseline, like if you say a carrot, it's going to be a baseline number of, let's say, vitamin C or whatever, right? Or whatever, mangoes, baseline of vitamin C. But there isn't going to be a range like in that particular item, right? For a soil that is nutrient depleted or a soil that is very nutrient rich, right? So you might read a label, right? That is something from a regenerative farm and you're like, oh, well, it doesn't seem like it's that much more. Well, it's going based on what the standard is for that item, versus that it's actually, that could be 3 to 4 to 5 times more nutrient dense than what it says on the label because they have these standardized labels. But also there isn't like the health foods and the veggies and the fruits and like all the good stuff that's really good for you. They don't get all these benefits, you know what I mean? It's a lot harder, for them to penetrate, any kind of things like that. Like you could go to a fast food place and they could say juiciest, best, biggest burger ever and world famous. And no studies needed, no questions are needed, $15.99 and people will buy it and no one bats an eye, right? But the minute someone, mentions, something is a little bit healthier than what's actually being mentioned, right? Hold up, you can't say that, like there's all these alarm bells. It's just so interesting. But anyways, continue where you were at, if you want to say.
Oh, I sort of lost my train of thought there, but
we're just talking about the difference between the regenerative soil and like comparing the carrots, situation on regenerative farmed carrots versus conventional carrots. That's where you're at.
So you're some of the claims, and I'm not coming up with this data, and again, I'm not an expert, but some of the claims that I've heard are so extreme as to say that 300 to 400 carrots, that can be grown in like a really poorly farmed area would be the equivalent of like one, regeneratively farmed carrot, or really what equates to a traditionally grown carrot. Because it's not like regenerative farming is reinventing the wheel, or that we're trying to say that people are doing something that no one's ever done before. It's like these are, when you're talking about the nutritional value in food, I would say the main problem and the main metric that we need to be concerned about is when we say, a red pepper has X amount of vitamin C, I think it, in supermarket standards, it doesn't. Let's just say it. People say, one pepper has 60% of your vitamin C. I think a conventionally grown pepper probably has like 5%, maybe 10%, because you also consider not only is it grown in depleted soil, but it's picked early, which means it hasn't fully developed everything it needs to. So I think that's a major concern that really, where you get, people will hear that number of like 300 to 400 to 1 and say like, that's nonsense. That's such a lie. And it's like, well, no, because we're not saying a regular carrot versus regenerative farming. We're saying conventional is like super watered down, super depleted. The soil has been abused for decades, let's say, in these big corporate.
And really quick, I think that number is talking about the vitamin density. And like, I think it's comparing vitamin A. So it's not like all of these different things. It's like this one that the carrots is known for, being high in. And I think that's where it comes. And that's where like a huge part of the world and a huge part of the issue that we see, like in America, specifically in the Western part, is that we're overfed and undernourished. Well, how can you be eating way more food than you've ever eaten? How can we be eating more food than we've ever been eaten in the history of our history and have less nutrients in the history of our history? Like what, and it's a soil, like is the big factor, in all of this. And that's where, like, what can you say to like some of the foods that we share often, if you want to add a little bit about that, and like, why is it important, that at least people doing this? I mean, I say if you have the ability to have one meal a day, at least, of like clean food grown in the proper way, regenerative, you're going to be doing pretty darn good. But 2 to 3, is going to be great, right? So like, yeah, what would you say to something like that?
Well, I mean, the human body is so exceptionally adaptive, and so we see people that eat, like I know fellas that are, just like pure Western males, and they're like, I eat fast food burgers and fries, and they've been doing it for years, and they're still alive somehow, which on its own, in its own right is like, wow, the human body is fantastic. Um, but the difference in quality of food that you're receiving and how you will feel, uh, you can't really know until you experience it yourself, right? In terms of energy, in terms of we've over the past several decades, we have slowly introduced, well, maybe not even slowly, we've introduced these practices in farming, the monocropping, the spraying with pesticides, the GMOing the genetics to grow a particular way. And then somehow we've just slowly or not so slowly also gotten sick, had these diseases pop up, these allergies pop up, these health ailments pop up. And so it's become kind of normalized or not really related to um, diet, right? So what could it be? What, is it the radiation? Is it the cell phone towers? Is it this? Is it that? People will look anywhere else other than like, is it the food, right? And just like the way the rainforest is designed and the rest of nature is designed, the human body is designed to work in these cycles. Cells are made, cells die. Tissue is formed, tissue dies. And if you're not properly replenishing those nutrients and those stocks, so the food that we are talking about, the food that we consume with Purium that's grown regeneratively, or if you're doing your own gardening, and this is applicable as well. If you're doing your own gardening this summer, right, and you want to go regenerative farming, the quality of that food, it takes a couple of years to really get the soil built up, but the quality of that food is going to be so much more potent. Like when we consume our greens, our green juice, our power shake, we're having the equivalent of like 6 microgreen salads in one serving, but it's also 6 regenerative microgreen salads in one serving, right? So, when we look at like why are people so sick? Why is the human body breaking down? Like this doesn't make sense. And it's like, well, no, because the body is designed, if you give it nutrients, it rebuilds and stays healthy. People think I'm eating these foods, therefore I'm getting these nutrients. Why am I not healthy? They're not. They're not. And when you start to see, like you said, once a day or twice a day or more often, you start to give your body the things that it actually needs to do stuff in an appropriate amount, or even more than an appropriate amount in some cases, right? To get caught up. You start to see these really big changes, even just with like skin health, with your response to like immune threats, right? And being around other people that are sick or that are drained, your sleep patterns, you really start to notice, because instead of doing these miraculous chemistry, conversions on basically fumes instead of fuel, your body is now being properly fueled and has the ability to really do what it needs to do. So, yeah, the foods that we have access to are just so much more potent, and you start to notice a difference. Is I guess really the main thing that I could say, is that you feel and notice a difference pretty quickly. And I remember one person saying to me, like, what's in this? Like, because we looked at the ingredients and like, this doesn't make sense. I've had like a lot of this stuff before. And it's like, well, have you though? Like, have you had conventional this stuff, or have you had like this stuff that actually has the appropriate amounts of, nutrition, that actually has the amount of vitamin C that that plant was supposed to actually have?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the thing that I think about too is our food systems right now are broken. Like I posted something about seed oils yesterday, and someone's like, what am I supposed to eat then? Like as if there's nothing else in the world to eat. And the challenge is, for some people, they are in spots in like, let's just say the US, for example, there are spots where there's nothing good to eat for them anywhere around. I was helping people with nutrition and stuff, and before this, And there'd be times where I'd be, I'd recipes and this and that. And there'd be times where they'd be in an area where like the only thing they have nearby is a liquor store. Like, how am I going to make a recipe list from your local liquor store? And so it's just like, there's real food challenges that some people are going through, that they are not in the ability to grow their own garden. They don't have the space, right? Or maybe they feel like they don't have the time, right? Or someone's telling them, you need to juice this and you need to juice that and you need to buy this. Like, I don't have enough money for a juicer and I don't have time for a juicer and I don't even have quality foods nearby to juice. Like I have a liquor store. Like, what am I going to juice there? They got some old bananas there and some old apples, right?
Olives, juiced olives.
They have some olives in a can, right? So there are some real challenges, right, that people are facing. I know even when I was like, I'm gonna eat healthy, right? And I'm learning what healthy really means, like some of these things we're talking about. But I was in the Middle East at the time, and they did not have as many options. They shipped everything from outside. They're in the middle of the desert. And so you didn't have quite as quality options, right? Even the healthy restaurants, like they were shipping from all over the world just to get those healthy foods in there. And so it wasn't like something that you could just go to your local market and get. Like they were shipping from all over the world just to get those things in their own restaurants. So there are real challenges and struggles. And I even someone I'm working with right now, they were telling me, oh my gosh, I was posting about watermelon, right? Because we have a bunch of seeded watermelon all over the place here. And I mean, some people do in some cities, not everyone does, but I am grateful that I do. And I was posting about it. And they were like, oh my gosh, I don't remember the last time I had a good watermelon. Like, I can't remember the last time. And it's like, dang. And they're in California, right? And they're in an area in California where they don't have quality fruits nearby. She just doesn't have it nearby in her driving distance. Because sometimes we were like, yeah, you got it over there in that city. Do you know where I live in relation to that city? I'm like 2 hours outside of that city. Like I can't, that's not going to happen, for some people, right? Or if some people are further, like there's so many different logistical challenges, right? Even when I was, and by the way, that person buys the superfoods and like gets it shipped right to their door and is very grateful because she can eat that in that area where she doesn't get it. When I was in Belize and I was sharing, I'm opening up coconuts, fresh sprouted, like legit sprouted coconut, and all these are different foods and like all these different fruits. And I can understand, I'm helping in a way that I'm sharing my lifestyle, but I'm also understand that some people cannot get these foods. Like I'm in a very special place and people can't get these foods and it's just a reality. And also I can't ship these people these foods that I'm growing nearby. You can't ship the people the food that you're growing nearby, right? And that's one of the things that I realized, right? And so now what I have and what we have is the ability to give someone access to these high quality nutrient-rich foods grown in regenerative soil, with green regenerative soil, which means green. They don't use animal manure, which is unique, right? And so there's a lot of things plastic-free, shipped to your door, even if you're in a food desert, even if you're in an area where there's no food around you, right? And that is special and that is unique. And that is something that is great. And it is also something that is really, really affordable for most people. I work with people that are literally on food stamps, have absolutely no money, no income. They're on like disability, right? They have incredible limitations and they're still able to add this in, right? That's amazing, right? And there's people on the other spectrum that are like, have plenty of money, right? And it's not an issue, right? And they still say, this is still the best food I've ever seen. Even though I have enough, I have access to buy whatever I want. They still say, this is the choice of food that I choose, right? And one thing that's really wild when I think about people that do have a lot of money, right, is what's really, really crazy is they have so much money, they still buy the lowest quality food. That blows my mind. That's something that I'm like, I don't understand, but I think it's this part. It's just a lack of education, right? I was working with someone who's incredibly wealthy in San Diego, super wealthy, and we were on the topic of protein, and he didn't know that plants have protein, right? And you would think someone like multi-millionaire, like super successful, like they know that, you know what I mean? But they don't, it's not that, it's just food and nutrition and our food systems, they're completely rigged, they're completely hijacked. The marketing is completely jacked. Like what, even when you think healthcare, health systems, like what that means to someone and what that means to you and me is totally different, right? And so there's a lot of things that are up against this. So I don't blame anyone, but also what I know and what I share and what you share, we want to help those. We want people to feel better. We want people to not have autoimmune diseases anymore, like myself, or not have diabetes, or not have all these different things that are completely destroying them, right? And going vegan, and we talk about that a lot, and eating not, it tells me what you're not eating, right? And is a huge piece because animal products, right, from meat, right, to dairy to eggs, right, all of those ones, and cheese, all of those ones are contributing to this issue, right? But they're not the only things they're not the only things in the food system that are contributing to issues, right? And it is important that we look beyond that. Sometimes I say going vegan is not the most you can do, it's the least you can do. It's like, that's a huge stepping stone. In my mind, that's the least that we should be doing in our mindset and what we're doing for the world, right? But it's not the only thing that we can do. And also don't limit yourself too. That's why I say for some people that are in that situation, like I was there before. It's like, this is the most important thing that we could possibly do, right? And it is a huge piece, but once you know better, you can do better. So when I learned that there's something that I could do better, I was like, okay, I can do a little bit better. I can make a small improvement here. And it was gradual. I did personally go vegan overnight. It was really easy, but I don't expect that from everyone, right? But I do think that everyone can do it. It is possible, right? As well as once I learned that, I learned a lot more things, when it came to nutrition. And I said, well, once I learned this, like, I'm also not going to put this in my body, like this other thing doesn't belong there too, right? And so that's just kind of a little bit. So yeah, we want to add anything to wrap this up, Mike?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, when you're talking about being in Belize, or like people that live these really healthy lifestyles, right? They're eating fresh coconuts and fresh fruits and tropical, like local fresh fruits. And they get these huge followings, and it's great. And they're promoting, like we I think both follow, or at least both know, and maybe a lot of people that follow us or will see this know Fully Raw Christina, right? And she's in, I think, in the millions of followers now, if I'm not mistaken. And she's always been promoting for a decade plus. She's been promoting, raw eating, and she posts and eats these like beautiful, super colorful meals. But where she lives and the food she has access to. I mean, when she first started her platform off, she lived in like a farming mecca of Texas, right next to like a giant farming area where she was able to build a co-op and had like like talking about watermelon. I mean, they had the old pictures. I remember them having, like, they had, you know, amazing access to watermelon. So you get these people that are building this following and this lifestyle, and when I say following, that means there are millions of people that look at it and say, I like this, I want this appeals to me. But unfortunately, like, she now lives on her own like private slice of land in like a tropical island down south. I mean, not a lot of us do. She grows her own bananas and like her own, so yeah, that's great. And yes, promote it and show how wonderful these foods are for people. But beyond people following her page or sharing a recipe, she can't really reach out or help people with that or give that gift to anyone else. And I think that's one of the beauties of what Purium's doing, and I think is only going to continue to grow, right? Is tapping into that, and that need that exists, that that obviously exists and that people are very interested in, and developing, or we already have developed, using the developed method of delivering this nutrition, delivering this quality of living to people anywhere in the world without losing the living enzymes, without losing the nutritional potency.
When I see someone like Fully Raw Christina, I agree with everything that you say, and I've seen her story as well. And I think, like, man, when they love what she's doing and they want to go do it, right? They're going to buy her juicer that she recommends, right? They're going to go buy, the local fruits around them. Some will have some good ones and most will have not very good ones, right, around them. And they'll just do the best that they can, right? But they're not going to get to the level of quality that she is at, because she's at maximum peak, like the ideal, everything organic, all homegrown, nutrient rich. She's probably growing in regenerative soil as well, right? And so imagine if she gave something, like maybe Purium itself or something exactly like it, to all of her people, to say, hey, I know you can't quite get this food, but this is the next best option that you can get, right? And in some cases, it might even be better, right? Depending on how it's grown, right? Like, I would argue that some of the superfoods, like, she can't grow some of those superfoods on her land, right? She is just that's not even possible. So I would argue even some of the foods that are growing could even be better than what she's growing there. So she could say, see what I got here, but I can give you something even better, right? That'd be pretty amazing. I think I look at that. There's a lot of people that I've worked with and I've talked with, and they're like, they have such incredible things around them and near them, just like her, like not exactly as big as Fully Raw Christina, but very similar, like very similar mission-based or mindset and building, and maybe even juicing, or maybe even giving people, or maybe they have their own company, little juicing company, and they're helping people, right? And it's so amazing what they can do in their local community. But I'm like, what about that person in Oklahoma? What about that person in Texas? What about that person even in California? It's a desert. California, well, they got a lot of rain recently, but it's still a desert. Like, there's still food deserts all over the place. Like, even look at Oakland, right? Oakland in California is like known to be like a lot of food deserts within that city, which just across the bay, San Francisco, which is arguably one of the vegan hubs in all of America. But you could be living in Oakland across the bridge with hundreds of vegan options, just across the bridge, with not enough money or not enough access to get over there, or you're just not going to go across there, right? Because you're stuck in your situation, right? So, like, you can help those people. How are they? How you make juice in New York? How are you going to give your juice in New York to someone in California? You can't help them that much. You can share your advice, but they're not going to get that quality that you're sharing. What you're sharing on your page, it'd be amazing if they could get, but it's just unlikely that they're going to get. Unlikely. And in some situations, yeah, but just not as much. And I think that's what's a unique impact that you can give people anywhere, in Canada, US, right? Like, really high quality and plastic free. And that's another thing. Canada's like that too, right? Canada more, but like the huge vastness and emptiness of it, right? In so many areas, and the, like, frozenness of like certain places.
Yeah, well, yeah, and like seasonally, I farm, and I do regenerative farming and outdoor hydroponic farming and all that kind of stuff, but like, it's only for a portion of the year, right? Like, we definitely have a long off season. But and just specifically to what you were saying about like the people like Fully Raw Christina and what have you, I mean, that is the ultimate. And I've said before myself, even, if I could, I would grow most of my own stuff, and there'd be certain things, let's say like carrot juice from Purium. I mean, if I had my own multi-100-acre property and I was regeneratively farming carrots, I probably wouldn't buy their carrot juice. But do I grow dragon fruit? Do I grow passion fruit? Do I grow, like, you start looking at like some of the other elements there. And with someone like Fully Raw Christina, the problem is no one can grow everything if they're in one place. Unless you own or can get everywhere to all the climates of the planet, you can't grow all of the various plants that we can benefit from. So what I'm trying to say is that, if you really want to support a mission bigger than our lifespan, that's bigger than us, supporting Purium and supporting the equipment that Purium has to transport food as living food anywhere in the planet, anywhere on the planet, I should say, the more Purium grows, the more that equipment and that mission can grow or spread, and we will get to a point where we are able to actually ship, the majority or all of the different types of foods that we can grow anywhere on the planet, and people everywhere on the planet could have access to all of the foods on the planet, in their healthiest form. So yeah, there's a lot of possibility, but it will take time, and it's bigger than us, but it's a very worthwhile mission to be a part of and to support. And in the short term, you're supporting, local farming, organic farming, non-GMO, people like ourselves who are out trying to help others and who are using their money to help others and support sanctuaries and charities and other things. So
Yeah, and good. And then those that can, like what you're saying, and those that can do what Foley Raw Christina does or anything similar, do it when you can. You know what I mean? But if you can't, like, this is a good in between and a good step in the right direction, and then you could also build upon that, and potentially build your own in the future, which is a huge goal of mine. Like, of course, like part of why I was in Belize and part of what I have is because that's part of what I want to do. And when I see, the future of, even the land that Dave has, for example, like I see that as like, I want something like this, like this is something, it's in the works, it's in the process, and, then you have yourself set up, but I still, even if I had that, I would still feel like it's not that it's not enough. It'd be plenty for me and my family, right? And whoever I care about, but it wouldn't be enough for the people, like all the other people that I want to impact, so I would still have to have something to help people, even if I did have something like that.
How do you get your food to others then? That's why I say the idea of supporting this mission, not just because of how it benefits each person eating the food, it benefits each of us sharing the food, but it will help propel a mission and a technology that is going to allow for the spreading of really healthy living food everywhere. And it really could change the dynamic of human health and the landscape of human health. So that's my take on regenerative farming. There's so much to it, but I hopefully we've kind of grazed over some of the topical stuff that at least people can understand that there is a difference, and this is some of what's involved in it and why it is worth, even if it is an extra, dollar on instead of a $6 grocery item, you're buying a $7 grocery item or something. I mean, you're supporting so much, you're helping so many other people, but you're also getting a lot more in that food for yourself. So it is worth it.
And one last thing to wrap it up, I think it's something for every single person, no matter what diet you're eating, no matter what you're on currently, right? No matter how you're eating, no matter whether you're vegan or vegetarian or keto, no matter what your mindset is, this food is great for everyone to add in to whatever they're doing. This isn't like you have to change everything and you have to go change your whole entire lifestyle. You just need to add this into whatever you're doing, and it's going to make the impact, So I think that's great, because that's another thing that people struggle with so much when they're trying to help people. It's like, no, you have to do this diet and this and this and this. No, just add this in. You just need to add this in, right? We could talk about all the things that you need to take out, but start adding, and oftentimes you add in the good, the bad just starts falling away. It just starts, your body does not want whatever is not supposed to be there. It starts telling you that's not supposed to be there anymore. And so you let your body tell you what's supposed to happen. And I think that's really powerful. All right. So thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate you. This is great. And see you all next week, same time, and chat soon.